room, like the room that he's like trapped in. And then they closed like the nearest grate to go in on their side. And then we see them fill it in. And then we don't see what happens next. If it was me personally, I would then go to the next access point and close the grate on that side and fill it in on the other side. And it would just, let's just hope that the boys were smart enough to do that.
Let's hope.
We don't see it because we don't need to see it. Let's just assume that that's what they did. Anyway, they once again entomb H.H. Holmes in some concrete. That's kind of fitting, really.
Poetic justice.
Yeah. The next scene is the drive home. Dean is driving baby. Ellen is in Sam's usual spot in the front seat, and Sam and Joe are in the back seat because they're the children. I think ideally in Ellen's world, Sam would be driving them home. I don't think she wants to look at Dean. I don't know why she's so fixated on Dean in this episode, but it's fine.
Maybe because he's the most like John in her eyes.
She does not call Sam to inquire about Joe's whereabouts a single time, even though I feel like Sam is much more likely to be broken in this scenario. But it's fine. No one is talking. It's very, very tense. So Dean turns on the radio, and the song is Cold as Ice by Foreigner, and I love that song. But Ellen is not in the mood.
I just love the poetic justice there.
Oh, yeah.
I like how well it fits with the situation.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
She turns it off, and Joe and Sam exchange looks, the exact looks that I have definitely exchanged with, my brother, being like, wow, Mom's real mad.
We're gonna die tonight, aren't we?
Honestly, I think that Sam and Joe could have been a cute couple. They're, having a cute little moment in the backseat here, and no one's looking.
But no.
No, it was not meant to be, and Joe does feel like a little sister to them.
I like that better, honestly.
Me too. I would prefer if they just really leaned into the little sisterness of it, but if they had decided to go romantic route, I kind of wish that they'd gone Sam, but that's okay. It doesn't matter now.
Yeah, no.
They get back to the roadhouse, and Dean is trying to apologize to Ellen, and Ellen does not want to hear Winchester talking about how proud Bill would be or how well Joe did. She's like, go away. And she kicks them out to the parking lot. Ellen is absolutely furious that Joe let the boys use her as bait. Ellen says that that's proof that Joe doesn't have the sense to do the job. Dean, she's not fit for the job because she's romanticized stuff. And Ellen's like, no, that's not your problem. Your problem is that you trust all these other hunters, and other hunters suck.
Well,
which is consistent. We've talked about Joe's history with being used as bait by Gordon, and we're going to go into it again next week on our Ellen and Joe episode.
Jeez.
But she does not have a good history even before this, so it's fine. Ellen's like, the boys are just like their father, which is obviously untrue, but I get what Ellen means.
Oh yeah.
In this sense. Ellen is very emotional, and Joe's like, well, what did John do? This is about John. What did he do? And then we don't hear this conversation because we're with the boys again, and they see Joe storm out of the roadhouse, and Joe sees them, looks at them, and takes a hard left away from where they're waiting for her to come back and talk to them. And Dean tries to see what's wrong, and he ignores Joe's boundaries at first when she says not right now, but then immediately Dean tries to leave when she's like, I said not right now, and then she's like, no, hang on, sorry I yelled at you for a second. But Joe tells Dean that their dads worked together on Bill's last hunt, and John's the one that screwed up and got him killed, and John could never face Ellen and Joe, and that's why he never came back or talked to them ever again or told the boys anything about Ellen or Joe.
And literally, I think that's so unfair for Ellen and Joe to be mad at the boys because they didn't even know about that.
I agree.
It is unfair.
I guess with Ellen, she's not really blaming the boys. She's just seeing, similar kinds of behavior that got her husband killed.
Yeah.
And with Joe, she can't be angry at John because he's not here. So, the next best thing are his sons. And that's not good, but it's kind of an explanation.
Yeah, Joe never had this story. She was a little kid when Bill died. So, she knew that her dad died, and we don't really know how much she knew about what actually happened to him, the specifics. Obviously, she didn't know this detail about John, but even though it happened a long time ago, and it's not the boy's fault, for her, she's just learning about it now, so it's it just happened. The trauma has been reopened. But it is unfair, but it's an emotional response for both Ellen and Joe, and I can get that. And I think the boys will get that, in time. Right now, they're both, just bewildered. They're like, what is she talking about? Because they don't know either. This is a new trauma for them as well. To find out that their dad got someone killed, someone who is loved by someone that they're starting to love and care about.
And here's a piece of information. Let's go be traumatized about it together.
Woohoo.
Joe is like, you guys should just go. Go away. And that ends the episode.
Well then.
Yeah.
Good times, everyone.
So we're gonna get right into the end segments unless someone else has anything they want to say about the plot of this episode.
I just want to note that Timeless also has an H.H. Holmes episode in which he is also defeated by a woman.
That's nice.
Oh yeah, it's like the historian of the group, so she pretends to be like a psychic and she knows his future, and it freaks him out long enough for the other people to get there and shoot him.
That's
I remember
excellent.
that now. Nice. I was trying to remember that.
It was amazing.
Total death count for this episode. This week we only saw one death. It was the first girl from the opening scene, bringing our on-screen total to 160. And on and off-screen total was 6 or 7. I don't know.
How many women had he kidnapped that we know of?
So we know
she said 6.
She said
in the
6,
beginning.
and I'm not sure if that was counting the first girl or not. And I don't know if we count Bill or not.
We'll count Bill.
Look at Bill. Let's say 7.
Bill deserves it after everything.
I mean, John was directly responsible for his death, so I'm willing to count it.
Yeah.
So that makes the on and off screen total 949 plus.
Well done.
We also tried to assign MVP of the week. So Meredith, who would you like to assign as MVP?
Joe.
Joe.
For obvious reasons. She did great.
That's fair. Audrey.
I was also going with Joe because, you know,
Joe.
she put the case together. She unwillingly was instrumental in his capture, and she also helped save Teresa.
Yeah.
So definitely Joe.
And Francis.
I'm also going with Joe. Like everybody else, you know, she found the pattern in the killings, presented the case to the boys, and then risked her own life to end those killings.
I was gonna give Ash some credit here, but you know what? I'm easily persuaded. I love Joe, so let Joe. You can
Peer
have
pressure.
this one. But that's kind of peer pressure.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, Joe, MVP of the week, across the board, unanimous.
Yeah, clean sweep. Love it.
Yeah. Bechdel test. Speaking of women.
Yes.
We had more than 2 named women because we had Ellen, Joe, and Teresa.
Yes.
Ellen and Joe talked to each other, and Joe and Teresa talked to each other. Something other than a man, I think? Yes.
Uh-huh.
Good.
Joe
At least,
and
yeah.
Teresa did for sure.
Yeah.
yeah. And then Joe and Ellen were talking about, like, Joe and her future.
Yeah, and like also
Yeah.
like the fact that Joe dropped out of college. I think we're good.
Oh my gosh.
Perfect.
This episode passed the Bechdel test.
Yay!
Should we have, like, confetti or something?
Feels like it. I mean, this is like the most Ellen and Joe heavy episode that we've had, and this is the like 3rd time that we've had an Ellen and Joe episode, and it's the first one that like passed.
This is amazing, guys.
This week, case of the week was the ghost of H.H. Holmes, but I'm gonna let Meredith go first for a segment on ectoplasm.
Oh, cool. Yay. So, ectoplasm is described as the physical residue a ghost leaves behind. In modern media, the circumstances in which ectoplasm appears are pretty undefined, but it actually comes from the 19th and 20th centuries during the spiritualist movement. Ectoplasm is a direct result of the spiritual world mingling with the material world during a seance. So the context of a seance is pretty important here. During the seance, the medium was sort of get possessed by the ghost so they could communicate with everyone at the seance, and as a result of the medium's body being used by the spirit, this physical residue would come out of them. It was a huge part of the showmanship and the spectacle of seances, and it was something physical and dramatic to convince people that the spirit world existed and they had actually come in contact with it. And this physical proof could be anything from like spirit rappings, like knocking noises, to ectoplasm. And based on my research, the mediums who attempted ectoplasm must have been really fun at parties. You had to be creative and a little gross to pull that off. So in 1894, Charles Richet coined the term ectoplasm for the substance that came out of the medium's orifices during the seance. According to one scholar, ectoplasm was the result of a spirit taking material substance from the body of the medium to fashion a body for themselves. And it would come out of the medium's mouth, nose, or surprisingly, often her vagina.
Great.
Just let that sink in.
A yeast infection waiting to happen.
Sounds like normal discharge, but observed by a man for the first time.
I mean, there's like a lot of it, so you got a problem there, ma'am. Anyway,
Seriously.
as you might expect, the research for all 3 was accompanied by some pretty weird black and white photos. Not graphic, though. Anyway, spiritualism was a movement that actually attracted a lot of women, so mediums were mostly female. So the ability to communicate with the spirit world was closely linked with femininity and also the medium's womb, which really goes to show you like how female-dominated this industry was. So now we know that ectoplasm doesn't actually exist. Sorry, guys. So the techniques that mediums use to convince these people that it actually did exist are fascinating. If you ever want to play a weird prank on someone, or if you're involved in theater, look to these guys. The ectoplasm prop was usually made out of some type of thin fabric, like gauze, muslin, chiffon, or if you're a medium named Marjorie Crandon and you're very dedicated, you use a sheep's lung.
Love that for her.
Yeah, I'm sure she got very fun seances, very popular. Harry Houdini tried to debunk her. Anyway, ectoplasm was the subject of a lot of scientific study as late as the 1920s. There are doctors with degrees analyzing these seances and trying to figure out how this happened. When, if you're involved in theater, you would just no. Anyway, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was one of these doctors, by the way. Fun fact, he was an eye doctor before he started writing Sherlock Holmes. We know that there is nothing scientific about these seances because they were more an accomplishment of theater and spectacular showmanship than anything else. And no one knew this better than the late, great Harry Houdini, who was one of my primary sources. Houdini was very dedicated to debunking spiritualists, so he ended up writing a lot about them and how they performed. I'm just focusing on ectoplasm, but if you want to be amused, please research Harry Houdini. He was unintentionally funny sometimes. BuzzFeed Unsolved has an episode on him.
I love BuzzFeed Unsolved.
It's great. So he described a seance where the medium expelled ectoplasm through her mouth, which appeared to be, in his words, inflated rubber. He was skeptical, obviously, and he was convinced that she used sleight of hand to get it into her mouth, a move he was familiar with because he was freaking Houdini.
Yeah.
He also theorized that it could be accomplished through regurgitation. So he claimed that he was not actually a skeptic, and he would gladly change his mind with sufficient proof. But he never saw anything to make him think that, quote, the great almighty would allow emanations from a human body of such horrible, revolting, viscous substances, unquote.
You've never heard of anthrax?
Well, not in this context, anyway. It's just thinking, if you're gonna communicate with ghosts, why do you gotta barf up weirdness?
Gotta have something that makes you different from all the other seance givers.
I'm special. I got extra discharge.
Gross.
I know. Well, at least there we're in agreement. But nowadays, ectoplasm in media is independent of the seance instead of being a direct result of it, as we see in Supernatural. And that's totally fine because tropes evolve. I think it's interesting that a technique to make seances more convincing became such an accepted part of ghost hunting and paranormal tropes. In conclusion, ectoplasm has a deep and surprising connection to women's bodily autonomy, and the spiritualist movement is actually really cool, even if it's occasionally gross.
That was super interesting.
I had no idea I was going to find all this.
Most of the details that the Winchesters and Joe dig up in this episode are more or less accurate to the story of H.H. Holmes. H.H. Holmes was born Herman Webster Mudgett and did become known as America's first serial killer. Again, I graduated about 6 months ago with a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, so this real-life serial killer was the perfect crossover of my interests. And just to note that I got most of my info on his background straight from Wikipedia. I started to write out notes, and I literally could do another hour of content just on H.H. Holmes. I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and I forgot for a minute that this was not that. So I'm back to make my notes a little bit more relevant to what we actually saw on the show. But here we go. H.H. Holmes was married 3 times, did not secure divorces from either of the 2 previous wives. He kept just adding them on. He had a son with his first wife, Clara, and a daughter with his second wife, Myrta.
Yay! Oh gosh, he put his genes out into the pool.
Oh, he did. Yeah, he had... Trust me, that's actually super important later, the fact that he had a son, because his great-great-grandson is going to become relevant by the end of this segment.
Interesting.
He had a history of frauds and cons, including while he was in medical school, him and his mentor, the chief of the medical department, got in trouble for digging up graves to use as cadavers, like they were freaking Victor Frankenstein or some shit.
I mean, that was pretty common back in ye old medical school days. Grave robbing was a huge problem in the 1700s.
It literally was.
Oh, yeah.
He had a big history of life insurance fraud and other scams, and so when he moved to Chicago in 1886, he started going by H.H. Holmes to limit the chances that his past victims would show up and be like, this guy is a piece of shit, and ruin his new life.
Who would have thunk it?
He worked at a pharmacy on the corner of South Wallace Avenue and West 63rd Street in Englewood, and he later purchased that as well as the lot across the street where he built the infamous murder castle, which was really just like a storefront on the ground floor and then had apartments on the second floor, and then they started to build a third floor that would be used as a hotel, but shit happened and it was kind of like only sort of finished.
So yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, 2 of Holmes's mistresses went missing, as well as the daughter of one of those women. Rumors were that the second mistress to go missing was pregnant and she was just never seen again. And then Holmes said that the first mistress died during a failed abortion and that he poisoned her daughter after her mother died.
Yeah, he must have been one of the most charismatic people to ever exist, because like you see photos of him and you're like, that is not an impressive man. How is he getting all these girlfriends?
3 wives in the